associate pastor at PUC. Anybody here from PUC? Well, I guess they're going to miss a good program. We're happy to have him with us. Ron Herchuk was a seminary student here. I believe he also is an alumnus of Andrew, aren't you, Ron? Right? One of our fair products here. Dr. Raymond Moore, president of the Hewitt Research Center. Dr. Moore, if you read the Review and Herald and a number of the other church papers, you will have seen his articles and publications in there. And a number of other magazines and journals carry his materials on early childhood education and a number of other articles. Linda Sharp, another one of our beautiful people here on campus. Linda is senior, Linda, this year. Senior. She's also the news editor of our student newspaper. And Linda knows all, sees all, and tells all. And this morning she's going to tell us how it ought to be, I hope. Before we go any further, I don't know if you were at the meeting last night. You know, I generally ask for a miracle every day, and for one that I can really see. And I usually get hit right over the head with one. And last night I described one that happened. Dr. Charlie Shedd was supposed to be speaking at the program over there, and I went to meet him on the airplane. And I heard the airplane, but we didn't see it. It was up above the snow. And it went over the airport one time and kept right on going. I understand Dr. Shedd is in the building here somewhere, probably still sleeping. So our original plan had been to react today as a panel here and as participants to his presentation last night. Well, things sort of changed. Dr. Witcheby was the miracle that I was looking for. He came along, it must have been 30 minutes before the program. One of the girls here on campus, Carol Martin, happened to walk into the snack shop, and she thought, say, that guy looks familiar, you know. And went up and started talking to him. Sure enough, it was Dr. Witcheby. She knew we were looking for him, and that's how everything happened last night. So we're going to have some changes this morning. We're going to react to the presentation that was made last night. I thought I saw Dr. Witcheby come in. Maybe he better leave. Charles, are you here? Okay, we can talk about him all we want. He's not here. We'll react to some extent on what he had to say. And then we want you to help us out. You all have a yellow card. Don't you? Don't you? Well, we'll see that you get some then. And we would like to have some anonymous questions that we could deal with right here. Now, we've got plenty of questions if we, want to rig the show here. But we would really have some, something that is really relevant to you. Before we go any further then, Irvin, would you have a blessing on our program today?
Heavenly Father, we ask thy blessing upon that which we discussed today. We thank thee that thou art ever present. We thank thee for the assurance thou will give to us, the wisdom, the insights, the understanding we need. And as we relate to life's situations and our personal needs, we pray that thou will grant to each of us that which will enable us to reflect thee, to find joy, life, happiness, and abundance here and hereafter in Christ's name. Amen.
Dr. Lorenz, are you within earshot yet? No. Marty? Oh, she's not. Well, let's see. Jose. Jose, would you go out in the back there and get a bunch of paper, small sheets of paper or something that you could pass out to everybody here so they can give us some interaction here? You know, some of these questions that you may want to ask, you may not want to identify yourself as being the asker. So we just soon have you put these things on a piece of paper and bring them in, and so we can get a chance to talk about them. Now, if you don't mind asking the question, fine. Ask it. We wanted to start off by giving each one of the panel members here just a couple of minutes to react to the program last night. And we do want to talk about some of the good things of the program, and if there were some bad things, we want to talk about those too. We'll start with Irvin. What was your impression last night of Dr. Witcheby's presentation?
I'm familiar with Dr. Witcheby. I took every one of the classes that he had available because of my particular interest. I believe that Dr. Witcheby handles any subject that he deals with frankness, clarity. I do not believe that there needs to be any misunderstanding. And I think too many times we tend to garble and as a result never get the message clear. And I believe that what he said last evening was what he pretty well has stated in his book. I'd like to make one observation, though, with regard to this whole area of relationships as it pertains to now and as it pertains to an ongoing experience. I refer to a statement in the book Adventist Home, which to me sets the whole tenor and objectives and really brings things into clear focus. You'll find this on page 105, and I'd like to read just one brief paragraph. It says, "Upon no account should the marriage relation be entered upon until," excuse me, this is the wrong one, but I'll read it anyway, until the parties have knowledge of the duties of practical and domestic life. The statement I really wanted to read was this one: to gain a proper understanding of the marriage relation is the work of a lifetime. Those who marry enter a school from which they are never in this life to be graduated. Therefore, I contend that what Dr. Witcheby presented last evening is in complete harmony, that we need to understand that this matter of sexual adjustment or any other part of the relationship is not something that we learn in a moment. Like sanctification is the work of a lifetime, so the understanding of the marriage relationship and sex in particular certainly needs to be understood in that kind of framework.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that the thing that impressed me most, and of course Dr. Witcheby is always fascinating, is the degree to which this sort of frankness is being accepted, and people are beginning to realize that it's an important aspect of life to be discussed, to be understood, not something to be hidden. The whole area of social relations, of marriage and pre-marriage problems. I think that I was impressed by the questions that were asked by the audience, that they were so open and they really wanted to know. I think, too, that I realize more as I listen to the questions and the answers, that what Dr. Witcherby has been pointing to, and I believe through the spirit of prophecy as well, is that not at all times can objective answers be given. As a matter of fact, very seldom. But that we need to discuss the relations are relative to our experience in Christ, and also relative to the openness and frankness that exists between people. I think this is the main thing, that we are beginning to realize that you can't just hide it, first of all, that it's got to be coming out in the open if we're going to really understand, and that there needs to be a relationship, a connection with Christ in order for us to be able to understand ourselves in relating with other people.
Thank you, Ron. Dr. Moore? All right, Linda?
Well, Dr. Witcherby's main talk last night was on, well, the questions were mainly on engagement and marital problems and this type of thing, which really isn't my area as of yet. But I was impressed mainly, like Ron said, with the ability to communicate, his openness and his frankness. But I think one statement or a few statements that he made really impressed me because he has so much common sense and he makes it seem so simple, like getting along with people, getting along in relationships. It's just something very down to earth. And really, in reality, the Lord doesn't want us to have to worry about all these hang-ups and about all these little things. Well, is this right? Should I do this on the Sabbath or should I not? And this type of thing. But it's really, He's given us these relationships, this power of sex, for our own enjoyment and for an expression of love, and that we are to enjoy it and not have all these little hang-ups about it. And I would like to say that I appreciate his common sense, and it instilled in me a desire to think about things in relationship to my own perspective, my own ideas, and not worry about what other people are going to think or about all these little things, whether it's right and wrong. To just pray for guidance from the Lord and take it from there.
Thank you, Linda. Dr. Moore?
Thank you. I concur with the remarks that have already been made, and especially as reacting to Charlie Witcherby, which is one of your requests, Con. We need this understanding. I don't think there's any question in most of our minds about that. I'd like to just go a little bit beyond this, though, if I may, and try to touch on the things that I think that Dr. Witcherby and others are trying to get to eventually, and we have a long way to go. And that is that not all of this winsomeness and delicateness that has heretofore been connected with the intimacy of man and woman is necessarily prudery. I think that God had a very definite winsomeness in mind, a very definite delicateness in mind that can indeed be tainted or damaged by too much so-called frankness. I'm not condemning anybody here nor last night. But this is not my point. I do think we ought to be very careful about being careless about this matter. Specifically, I'd like to suggest that it's very easy for us to be preoccupied with this very important thing that is called sex. It is important. It's a dessert. It's a lot of other things if it's handled properly within the proper framework of marriage. And certainly, you know, folks, just because you're married doesn't mean it's right. Because the way some of these things, Mrs. White and others have pointed out, and those of us who have dealt in many, many marriage situations know that most marriages do not handle it well and for the right purposes. So many of us are beasts rather than children of God in the way we go about this. I just wanted to mention just specifically this, that if we could, it seems to me, if we could work to some and talk to and think in terms of some very large principles. For example, self-respect and freedom. A truly happy woman or a truly happy man will be there to guarantee the self-respect and freedom of his partner. And love is built upon self-respect, if I understand it clearly. So this morning I would like to see us think of ourselves really as children of God. And so that when I look upon my mate, I think of her as a child of God, a very, very serious trust.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. I agree with Dr. Witcheby last night. You know, as a psychologist, I'm up on all the wild, interesting theories. And it seems like the most popular one today is sex is a cure for everything, you know. And the country's been pretty well trying this out now for about 7 or 8 years. And I understand the mental institutions are continuing to be filled. As a matter of fact, with more people now, well, they're full, you know. They're filled with more people now than they ever were. So I suppose open sex, free, you know, in the streets and so on, is not the solution. You know, according to the Freudian theory, if you've got a hang-up of any kind, you know, sex is your problem. I don't think that is a cure for everything. I was interested, though. I was trying to analyze the kind of question that was being asked last night, and I'd say 7 out of 8 questions had to do with sex. What does the panel see as significant in this sort of an analysis?
And I'd like to say that the reason for that, I contend, was because it moved in that direction right from the very beginning. And the reason was because there was no prepared topic because of that, and there were so many, and you set the tenor of the situation by referring to the book. Dr. Witcheby picked up from that comment, and from there then went into the area where they would be able to ask questions, and naturally it moved within this framework. So I believe it was not necessarily a preoccupation of Dr. Witcheby's necessarily, but it was the way it began, and from there it moved into that kind of framework. I cannot see how it would have gone any other direction.
I think that, as Dr. Moore said, you know, we shouldn't become preoccupied with the topic, although it is important. But I think that most often, now that it is beginning to open up somewhat, those who at all are willing to discuss it, it seems, get into the extremities of the topic and do not discuss the basic things. And I saw it as just a thing that usually happens. If someone is willing to discuss it at all, it almost seems always to go to the extremities of the topic.
Dr. Hicks made the statement that sex is not the most important. In fact, he said it's like a dot on a page. But he says it is a very important dot on that page. And I believe that the reason why it is an element of preoccupation in the minds of many is because it is misunderstood, and because the devil has capitalized on this particular energizing drive.
It is a very strong biological drive, just about like eating, you know. You know, if God made man with a sex drive, none of us would be here probably if God hadn't made it that way. But like everything else that God has given us, it can be abused. We all have difficulties, I think, with our biological drives and so on. A lot of people eating, others have other problems. I'm just wondering, when should sex education begin, and how should it begin? Linda, let's see what you can do with that.
Well, I'm a firm believer, I suppose a lot because of my own past experience, that it should begin in the home as soon as the children start asking questions. And I remember thinking of my own experience in my own family, how as little kids and watching my little brothers and sisters grow up, that when they'd ask questions, just open, frank questions, how kids do, that my mother was always so patient in answering them. And she would answer the question exactly what they wanted to know, so there would be no doubt in their mind. But yet she didn't dwell on go into elaborate details and stuff. And as we grew older, she'd tell us a little bit by little bit until we were old enough to understand the whole concept. And then when I got into school, I remember there were so many girls. I went to public school for my first 8 years, and there were just so many girls that didn't understand. They really didn't know the facts, and I felt so sorry for them. And they'd bring up some of these weird ideas and everything, and I felt proud saying, well, that's not the way it really is. My mother told me how it is. And I, almost seemed like an authority on the subject. And it got so that they respected my ideas, and they really thought a lot of my parents for telling me, and they used to come to me and ask questions instead of trying to give information. And I think this has helped me and the rest of, my brothers and sisters as well, because this is what I'm acquainted with, to have a good, healthy idea of what sex is all about, and we didn't have to learn it from outside experiences. School, it is good in school for those kids who don't have it at home, but I really think it should begin at home with the parents.
I'm a watcher of human behavior, and I'm very interested in the springtime when the dogs are out there mating. All the mothers run out and grab their kids and take them in the house and pull down the shade. I remember a turtle one time crawled up in our yard. We lived down here on Hillcrest, and started laying eggs in the yard. And all the kids in the neighborhood were standing out there watching, and I went out there and I was watching too. And my kid said, "Daddy, where did those eggs come from?" Well, I said, "Well, they're inside that turtle. That's a female turtle." And how do the turtles get inside the eggs? And I was attempting to explain everything. That was 4 or 5 years ago. Now my little girl is about 8 years old, and she's been asking where babies come from. Well, it was very simple to say, well, you remember all those eggs that were in that turtle, There are just so many things that you can use to, answer questions if you face them when the question comes up. Now, we'd like, Jose, would you take charge of getting some of those things in to us? And we'll start with one like this, and we would like to have now, to get some more participation going with the people in the audience here, here's a question here that we can start off on. How can the unnatural social pressure which exists on SDA college campuses you have to date, let's see, be corrected? How can the unnatural social pressure on our campuses today be corrected or moved into the vein of natural desire to associate with the opposite sex? I'm not sure I understand the question. Ron, all right.
Trying to be anonymous, but I guess it didn't work. But I don't mind explaining the question. My question is, how can this unnatural social pressure which exists on our college campuses, that is this, to define this unnatural social pressure, you have to date, it's now or never. I mean, you're in prime shopping area and prime time. How can this social pressure or these ideas be changed to natural desires for associating with the opposite sex?
I'd like to respond. I do not believe that it can be changed. That sounds like pretty negative. First of all, it is really is an unnatural setting. And to make something that is unnatural natural is, again, probably what Con is talking about, asking for a miracle. It is not necessarily a family setting, is it? Within given boundaries, we can say yes. But it is not necessarily a natural setting, but we now have to ask some questions as to what do we do with the setting in which we are in to develop a healthy attitude toward interpersonal relationships. And I think one of the statements that my wife has made a number of times, to me, and to our family. He says, and I'm sure you can find this in literature, and that is that before there is a development of a two-ness, there has to be a development of a oneness, which means simply that before we can effectively relate to another person, we better know who we are and where we are and what we're all about. Then we will be free to be responsible and responsive individuals. I cannot, in all good conscience, say that we can take this kind of setting. Possibly the closest we can come is to have, more house mothers and fathers in little dormitories. That's maybe one way that it could be accomplished. I think Dr. Moore is chafing at the bit, and I think he has some ideas. But even at that, it still would be an unnatural setting because it is not within a family framework. But it is a matter of interpersonal relationships, and that's what we've got to come to grips with.
I would agree, Irvin, that it would be a matter of interpersonal relationships. I would like to offer 3 explicit suggestions. They may sound difficult, but hard problems are not necessarily always finding easy solutions. In the first place, at the risk of spiritualizing this thing, I would like to point out again that we need to do our best to get our students' minds on each other in the sense that God planned. He is training us to be kings and priests unto Him, to help rule the universe throughout eternity. So we're in training here as princes and kings. All right. Then why don't we look to our training in the sense that we are children of God and try to, as a matter of fact, do our best to guide our students to an understanding of Christ and His sacrifice, of praise of God, as Elder Kuhn told us last week. And then our minds will not be quite so obsessed. Now, we're still going to have these problems, as Dr. Witchby pointed out last night, that somebody 79 is having a problem. But so let's offer 2 immediately practical suggestions, at least that I think they are. In the first place, we have this sort of a fear that's dogged us for many years. At least it was happening before I was in college, and that was quite a few years ago. That we're afraid to talk to the opposite sex, for fear that we'll think that somebody is going to think that we're trying to marry them, or have an affair, or something else. All of these unnatural fears. And this used to be a matter of distress to everybody, I think. And then one day, when I was a sophomore in college, a senior girl, a great big husky lady, was a good friend of mine and just better than I ever realized. She was a very dear person. Reva Palmer is her name. Wrote me a little note at the head of a youth instructor article, and she said, "Ray, this has helped me. Maybe it will help you." And she had seen that I was very preoccupied because I was working my way through college and so on, and I didn't feel very friendly, and I apparently was inhibited. And the article said, "Don't wait for others to say hello to you. Wrap your hearts around them and say hello to them." And it seems to me on a campus like this that we should have this attitude. If we're looking at each other in the proper perspective, then we have no problem at all. If I want to talk, I'm past middle age, some people would say. At least I'm in my middle ages. And if I want to talk to a fellow or a girl or a man or a woman, I should feel free to. This morning I walked in here, and Mrs. Myers was secure enough to tell me that my tie was askew. And if I see you walking down the road with a little string dangling from your dress, wouldn't you feel happy if I said, "Say, you're having a problem here"? Or maybe it's snowing down south, as they used to say, that slip is hanging. Even if I'm a man talking to a woman, I think that that I should be secure enough to be friendly enough to practice the golden rule. Now, the third thing, and I know that some of you think I have an obsession on this business of balanced work experience education in our schools because I've written so much on it. We've tried to practice it, and every time we've practiced it, it has been successful in that when we have this kind of a program going in our schools, the boys are mixing with the girls, the men with the women in a natural way. And as they work from day to day physically and are preoccupied with constructive manual work and this type of thing, in so much as practicable, I say constructive, as Ellen White points out, and less of this very heavy study, and I'm at risk of some of my colleagues here, I think we throw entirely too much reading and other heavy work upon our students. This is not heaven's demand. This is some figment of our traditional imaginations, the conventional wisdom. If we would let that down a little bit and balance it off, as Ellen White says, more work, if anything, than study, our students will not have this, what she calls fevered mind. They will not be, as she says, nearly wild. And their minds will be much more pure. I'm quoting. I think I'm being quite safe within the bounds of the spirit of prophecy and the things that I say. I really do believe that these are our basic solutions.
I have a few comments to what Dr. Moore had said. He was just talking about working together, and I was thinking in my own experience, I'm supposed to speak from the college standpoint, that I think this really would be a good idea because being a PE major, I have a lot of classes that are mixed, guys and girls, and where we do a lot of things, physical activity together. And I think the friends that I develop in these type of classes and also in the working situations that I have are really my closest friends, and yet we have nothing going, and they feel free to talk to me, and I feel free to talk to them, and it's just very much at ease. And I think that if we could have more of this mixing and doing something constructive with our hands so that we're thinking of something else and not worrying about, well, does this guy think I'm putting the moves on him or something like that, then we would be much more at ease with the other people that we don't come in contact with. When we're up in the cafeteria, we feel more self-confident of ourselves because we have friends of the opposite sex. We wouldn't be afraid to sit at a table where there are people that we don't know. And we wouldn't be afraid to get to know other people. And I think it's basically building up our own self-concept and teaching others to do this by having mixing relationships in a physical sense where we're doing something constructive other than just sitting there trying to get to know each other.
We have done a lot of talking about sex, and it's going to keep coming up. After all, that is a part of family life, human nature, and so on. And families are where children come from. Families have a number of functions. In order for the family to stay together or to exist, one of the functions of the family is a procreative function. We don't place as much importance on that today since we have too many people around, some people think. But for a long time, the more children the family had, apparently the greater the honor and so on. Society has changed quite a bit, and we don't need quite as many children to help us with the chores. But in order for a family to stay together, there is that one function that it has. There was a question that came in asking if there would be any possibility of Dr. Charlie Shedd presenting the speech sometime today that he was not able to deliver last night. We won't be able to tell you immediately on that since we don't have our hands on Dr. Shedd at the moment. However, you may want to keep your eyes and ears open today for some sort of an announcement because we knew that he might be willing to make a presentation a little bit later tonight. Now, it depends on what his schedule is. Dr. Moore, did you want to deal with that one question there?
One was addressed to me. Do you believe that once divorced, stay divorced, both partners are just the one that committed adultery? What about the one who drove the other to commit adultery? If I'm to give the Bible concept here, as I understand it, it would be that Only the one who has not committed adultery is the one who is free to marry. Now, we know that in our church many times that this edict has been violated, and after a certain amount of, or certain period of repentance, why the church has welcomed them back in to fellowship. That's a risk that the individual himself must take. I hate to seem hard about this, you know. I'm just simply quoting what the Bible basically says. This business about what about the one who drove the other to commit adultery? That's a very, very complex question, because sometimes that's what happened, and sometimes that isn't what apparently happened isn't actually what happened. So I think I'd better abide by what Paul said to the Romans, and that is, judge not that ye be not judged.
Here's an interesting one, and the reason I happen to be interested in this is because I'm familiar with a case like this. Recall last night a woman or a person had written a question in saying that this woman has 5 children, and she knows, but her husband doesn't know, that the third of those 5 children is not his child. The person who asked the question said, should I tell my husband, or should she tell her husband, her fine husband? Dr. Witcherby said no to that. Now, here's a question that's just come in from the audience here that says this particular person agrees that no, she should not tell him is the answer. However, 3 other people that this person talked to say absolutely yes, she should confess to her husband. What does the panel think of that? I mean, I am dealing with a family situation like that right now, and I need some help.
John, I just want to tell you that I agree with Dr. Witcherby right down the line on that. I think that we can cause ourselves all kinds of distress. We have many, who sitting here has many secret sins or hasn't had many secret sins in his life? They're not necessarily prurient things. There may have been hateful thoughts about other people or distrust or other things. If we go around confessing sins, which grade of sin should we confess? At what grade? I would, if my wife, I know she hasn't done any such thing, but if she had, I love her so much, and she's so dear to me, I'd just like to have her not tell me.
I would like to have the 2 unmarried members of our panel respond to this and see what the unmarried viewpoint is.
Well, I was just going to say, I can't exactly relate to that part of it, but I'd like to, in the same vein, ask to what extent, I mean, if you say no at that part of the marriage, how much do you keep from, say, someone that you were considering marrying, that you've had things happen in your past? I mean, to what extent do you reveal? Does that mean that you keep secret sins or things like that, where you may, in my situation, as a man perhaps fathered a child, should you confess this to the one you're about to marry, or should you keep it quiet?
You're directing to me now.
Well,
all right. All right. I just want to say that if you have fathered a child, the child is now living, then you have an obligation. Then she probably should know. It seems to me. But if it's something that, for example, you've had an affair with somebody else, or you've had a number of affairs, and this is very common these days. If you start reciting those affairs, and she finds out that some of them were her former girlfriends and so on, you're going to have a bizarre time for the rest of your marriage. I've just gone through one situation just in recent days of a young couple where the man felt that he needed to tell her. So he told her all, but their marriage is just about going on the rocks right now.
I think one of the things, as I've tried to analyze this whole area, is simply the goal for the relationship, no doubt, is transparency if it can be accomplished. But in order to achieve that, there has to be a willingness on the part of 2 people to accept full responsibility of that which is disclosed. And the less a person knows the other person, the more difficult it is to reveal. But to maintain and to retain a healthy relationship, it seems to me there are things that should be in the privacy of that individual. I believe that probably this one person that we're using as an illustration is probably having the greatest problem, to almost to the extent that it could almost be obsessive. In other words, it's so overwhelming within her and how to handle it that she feels that the only way is release. But I do not believe that will do anything to, like you have said, to enhance the relationship. And so with a young fellow and a girl, it seems to me that the recital of these things is not what's going to help in the relationship.
I have a couple of comments. First, on the lady with the 5 children. I think that, I'm sure if it was me, I would not tell, because there's other people to think of besides yourself. If you're thinking of only yourself and you think it would be a relief of tension to tell, you've got to think of your husband. What would he think? You know, the distrust that would be manufactured there. Think of your children. What if they ever found out? I think this person really is going to have to depend on the Lord wholly to take this guilt away from her and this obsession. And if she does this and really, really pleads with the Lord, He will take it away from her and keep her marriage together and keep her marriage very happy.
I just have one other question here. What you said, Elder Kurtz, I got the first part of it, and this is why I made the statement I did, because this is what I feel. I didn't say it because I feel I'm not by no means an authority in marriage, but as I understand it, as it's been explained to me, as it has been revealed, I understood that we are to try to attain through the power of God transparency in the relationship, as you said. And perhaps it's only myself, but I think that the lady who asked the question, these 3 people who she has talked to probably have the same hang-up as I do. I cannot see. To me, it's non-coherent to say that, well, this is what we're aiming for, but definitely not. No, you cannot. You should not reveal this. Is what you're saying then that this couple has not and will not attain a place in their marriage where they can be this?
No, I'm not saying exactly that. As a matter of fact, I'd like to see them have a closer and closer fellowship, closer relationship. My concern here is at where do you stop telling all of your innermost thoughts? Before God, your innermost thoughts cherished are actions, aren't they? They may not be overt, but we're dealing between man and God right now. So my concern here is not that we not be honest with one another. I want us to be honest with one another. But we also have a higher rule, if anything, here, if you have to choose between one of 2 things here, and that is how much we can hurt the other person. As Linda's just said here, I feel it's you could just really seriously hurt the lives of these others. So I think it's a matter of concern and love. In other words, it's how do you show your love the most? By revealing it or by keeping it? And in this particular case, it seems to me, in view of the damage that can be done, you would be showing it more by keeping it.
I think, too, we need to remember that we don't have all the story. I think that's something we need to recognize in this situation, that we have only the side of the story of that question, but we do not have all the implications that go along with the personality, the one person's view of how healthy the marriage is, and so we do not have that total picture.
I have another comment as to what Ron said about, when you're engaged or going with someone, how much should you tell them? Well, I feel that if someone were to bring up to me all their past experiences, and their joys and their sorrows, this to me would be comparing me to their past love affairs, which I definitely would not like, and I would just as soon, say, well, forget it. If you're going to keep remembering these, just I wouldn't be impressed at all, and so I don't think it's such a good idea because it's so like you're comparing him.
Thank you. Now I have a question I'd like to give to the audience here.
She's already told his people, what about this? I mean, she should be the first one to tell him. Why don't these people go back and tell?
That worries me too.
Well, in this particular case, I think the three people on the note here, the person who wrote the note asked three other people for their reactions to Dr. Witcheby's question. But on the other hand, Yvette, I agree with you. If the woman is going to tell somebody, probably it ought to be her husband ought to be one of those persons, maybe. You know, if he's going to hear it, he may as well hear it from her rather than,
Well, you would agree, though, that you would agree that she might seek counsel, for example, from somebody like you, who she knows is professional, or Dr. Witcheby or Elder Kurtz or whomever, who she knows will keep her confidence. But she better not be asking anybody else.
another respondent here.
She will transfer a burden of forgiveness upon her husband, which is also very hard to bear sometimes. It's very difficult to forgive in some of these instances like this. He might never forgive her. And the opposite is true because women sometimes have a harder time to forgive than others, especially in the case of unfaithfulness. And so part of her guilt, she is transferring, part of her burden, she is transferring over to the other person to relieve her of her guilt, which I feel is not really fair either. She better bear that burden of guilt until she can let the Lord take it away from her rather than transferring it to somebody else.
That's a very good perception. Another comment back there. Dr. Dyer. Yeah, now you can see the story can be very complicated. There are all sorts of interpretations of this thing. You've got to see what all the facts are. Another one. I have an interesting one here now to give to the audience. Here's a question dealing with a remarriage. Now, two people who have been married and divorced, should they get remarried if there has been an intervening marriage? In other words, they were married, they got divorced, one of the partners married somebody else, got divorced from that person. Now, should this couple remarry again?
Where are they now? I'm lost. I mean, are they married now?
Well, that's the question. Should they get? What are the chances? For the
That's
marriage?
what I'm asking. Where are they now? You're saying, are they supposed to unlatch themselves with their present spouses to go back to? I'm not sure that I'm clear on the question, but maybe that's what they're saying. In other words, they have divorced from their spouse. And where I'm asking the question, where are these people? Are they single at this point, and should they get remarried? If that's the question, then I can relate to that and probably comment, but I don't know where the...
It doesn't look like, it is not exactly clear, but I believe, let's say that both of them are unmarried now. One of them has had a second marriage that was resulted in divorce.
And both of the other partners are dead?
No, they're not dead. What are the chances for survival, then, of a remarriage if one of the partners was married and divorced in the intervening period?
I'm interested in the statement that Dr. Bergler in his book Divorce Won't Help has made. He says really, by and large, that divorce doesn't help. I'm sidestepping the question, I know, but I think it's important here. He said that divorce really doesn't help, it just separates two bodies. He says that the emotional and the environment in which was established in the first relationship, to a large extent, unless it's corrected, will bedevil the second relationship. And I think this is true. When you ask the question, what are the chances? Unless there's something really has taken place, both emotionally, spiritually, and so on, the chances are they could go on repeating, like so many have, this whole cycle of marriage and remarriage. And I'm not answering that question in terms of what has been asked, but that's my reaction.
We have one here I would like to get in before we run out of time. I would like to address this, first of all, to our two unmarried folks here. Leaves you out, Ray. What about the girl who has lost her virginity? Should she tell her husband-to-be about this matter? I'd like Linda and Ron to react to this, and then Dr. Moore and Urban Kurtz.
Boy, that's a hard question. I don't know, really. I don't think she should, because just from what I have read, from people I have talked to, if she goes ahead and she tells him that she has lost her virginity, even though she may be very, very, very sorry, he's always going to have this thought in the back of his mind, oh, she did it once, will she do it again? And I can see why he would have this. And I think it would be very damaging to the relationship. Yet, if you know the person so well, and if it's that type of person that has absolutely no jealousy whatsoever and could cope with this, and you are absolutely positive and you ask the Lord's help and guidance to make your decision, if you feel it's absolutely necessary, then maybe you should go ahead, but I don't think I would.
I think that to answer this question, we have to go back to Elder Kurtz's comment again. And I like the word. I had this picture in my mind, but I like the word you use, transparency. I think it depends on the state of communication that the couple has reached. I think that, at least for myself, as I look ahead, ideally, I hope that before I do get married, that we would have established this sort of communication so that all these frank things can come out. But yet, because of this, our love is growing, because of our frankness with each other. But I can think of situations of couples I know that I think that such information could really throw the guy off, and I think could hurt the girl a lot as well. But so I think that it's relative. I think that it's relative. But I think that ideally, if they are close enough to transparency in their relationship, I think that she should reveal this to her.
While we're here, do you think it's necessary that they reveal this information? I mean, say that you have reached the state of transparency and you could do it. Do you think it would be necessary or anything would be gained by it?
I think this is what I'm saying. I think that if they have reached this place, transparency, so to speak, I think that it should be.
I just wanted to say that I have an inclination to agree with Linda, unless the man specifically asks her, or the conversation reaches that particular point, in which case they should have a very clear understanding before they are married, and have an understanding that they will never discuss it after. I just want to make one brief comment on Dr. Kurtz's former statement, and that is with respect to these people remarrying. I'd like to have you put yourself in the position of being in a church business meeting or a church board meeting, board of elders, making a decision on a couple like this. And they're two young people. They've both recently come back in revival meetings. They have completely embraced Christ. They have been divorced from their partners, even though the two of them were married before, and then they'd gone off and married. Now they come back, deep, dedicated Christians, and they say now, look, we each went out and had our affair, but we're forgiving each other, and we want to be remarried. It would be pretty hard to say no, wouldn't it?
You know, dealing with the question of transparency, that bothers me just a little bit, because I don't know that any of us can ever achieve complete transparency. And as a psychologist, I even have some doubts whether this is desirable. I understand what you mean, and I will agree with what you're talking about. But we all, none of us, bears our inmost soul to anybody, and probably not even God sometimes. I have a couple right now. The wife has just left her husband Monday. She's on an airplane right now for Florida. The battle cry she had, it was the line. The line was drawn. Her battle cry was open and honest to her husband, and his response was straight on. He was not going to tell her everything he did. The husband had not a sexual affair, but just a brief encounter with another woman. He kissed her. And now this girl wants her husband to tell her everything that he does. I question, this man has nothing left. This is the only thing he's got left. I mean, she has robbed him of everything else, all their years of marriage. The only thing he's got left now are his thoughts. And now she wants those too. I don't know. I question the transparency.
Well, I think,
30 seconds, sir. 30 seconds.
30 seconds, you're jabbing it apart. This matter of transparency does not mean to completely dissect the individual limb from limb so that there's nothing left of him. It's not what I'm talking about. It's the ability to be straightforward, to be forthright, to be able to live within one's self and his conscience, to be able to relate to the person with such ability to really be where he is rather than being a phony, to be something that he is not. These are the things that I'm talking about in terms of transparency, so that the function of my communication and everything that goes on between me and my partner is such that it is that kind of relationship. That's what I'm referring to.
All right, I understand that. We haven't been able to answer all the questions, and we haven't even heard all of the questions, and we had some real good ones here. We've set the stage, at any rate, here. We've been sort of freewheeling, and we've sort of set the stage for a number of meetings. And you're going to see some of the things we've talked about here recurring, some recurring themes here, because let's face it, our families in the world are in trouble today. You know, our industrialized society has caused such tremendous social changes that we don't need the rest of our family anymore. You don't need your mother and your sister and brother and so on to help you do anything. We've got all kinds of machines and so on. You don't need them anymore. Well, this whole thing has caused a dissolution of the family, and society has taken over so many of the functions of the family that there are very few that the families have left, and we're getting out of practice. We've got to get back together and start strengthening up our families. You know, with a divorce rate of 50% like that around here and 75% in other places of the country, this place is going to the dogs. And those of you who are Seventh-day Adventists, we're catching up. We're catching up. And it's not good. Not good. A society that has weak families is going to be a weak society, because this is where the personality of people is made, right there in the families. Notice right from here, go right straight on over to the Johnson Auditorium. Dr. Shedd will be speaking there on the topic of how to tell you're really in love. And boy, I don't want to miss that one. See you all later.